Hi everyone, it's Sean from What Up. Welcome back to another video and happy Wheel of Time Day. We are less than a week away from Season 3, premiering March 13th of the Wheel of Time, and I, for one, couldn't be happier. Now, this is going to be an explained video. It's something that you folks have asked me to do, and so we're going to talk today about the warders, warder bonds, who, what, where's, why's, different types, all kinds of different stuff. So if you love the Wheel of Time, if you're excited about Season 3, if you just want to hear about the news, consider making us your home for Wheel of Time news. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and of course, tell a bunch of your friends. We're less than 300 people away from my 25,000 subscriber goal. I know we can do it, folks. I believe in you, and we're going to do it in the next week. I know it'll happen. All right, so we're doing this video, and I have done some of these explained videos before, but it's been about 4 years since I've done them, mainly for people who watch the show that haven't read the books. So you'll notice I have another warder video on my channel from 4 years ago, but the information isn't fully there. It's not as polished. It's not quite as good. And it's not really geared towards show watchers as much. So we're going to update that because you folks have been asking me questions, and if there's any other explained videos you want done prior to Season 3 dropping, let me know down below. So again, this video is geared more towards people who watch the show but have not read the books, or who watch the show and maybe haven't read the books in quite some time and want some sort of refresher. So there's that. All right, so we're going to start off by defining what a warder is. A warder is essentially a man who protects his Aes Sedai. They're like a bodyguard to an Aes Sedai. They are bonded through the one power, and there's a bunch of benefits and some drawbacks to that bond. And their whole reason for being is to protect their Aes Sedai. Now you notice I said man. In the book series, most warders are men, and by most I mean like over 99%. I can only think of 3 instances where a woman becomes a warder in the book series, and they're all for very good plot reasons. And it's not for really any other reason than it's against tradition. Mostly, Aes Sedai follow tradition more than they follow Tower Law. It's kind of baked into them. And traditionally, a warder is usually a man, so that's what they do. They bond men who instead of women. It does happen in the book series. In fact, it's happened 3 times as far as I'm aware. I won't get into the hows and whys, but again, important for plot. So who wants to become a warder? Well, there's a bunch of different types of people who wants to become a warder, and there's probably as many different reasons as there is different people, but there is a few different ways people become warders more often or more commonly than others. The first one is incidental or accidental warders. So these are people who either travel with an Aes Sedai, meet an Aes Sedai, form a relationship with an Aes Sedai, become a lover to an Aes Sedai, and they're asked to be bonded by that Aes Sedai. So it sort of forms or happens organically. And then there's things that happen out of necessity. So someone takes a wound that may normally kill them. Someone is going into a dangerous situation, or an Aes Sedai needs help in some way, and they bond with this person to be able to give them sort of an edge or an ability to recover from a wound that they would not normally be able to do. So that's one thing. But the more common way of becoming a warder, and the more common why of becoming a warder, is because warders are legendary. They have all these legends about them. They have all these supernatural qualities attributed to them that mostly are not true. But young men hear these stories and they want to become like them or be them, so they travel to the White Tower to train with the warders. And they train using different types of weapons. They train with blade masters that are there. They train with fighting with their hands and their feet. They learn all sorts of different things. And then eventually, after they become trained up and they become pretty much deadly in their own regard, they are then chosen and bonded by an Aes Sedai if they so choose. That's how they become warders. That is, most warders happen that way. The incidental or accidental or out of necessity does happen in the book series, not near as often as people who seek it out, go to the tower, and want to become warders. So what is the warder bond? Well, the warder bond is something that Aes Sedai or another channeler, we'll get into that in a minute, does in order to meld their sort of a psychic link. I guess the best way to describe it. They use the one power to connect them together. So when they're connected together, they can both kind of sense where each other are, distances and direction. They can feel each other's strong emotions. So a warder always knows if his Aes Sedai is upset, angry, scared. He'll know these things. And it also has some benefits to both the Aes Sedai and to the warder themselves. So a man who's bonded as a warder gets a bunch of benefits. They need less sleep. They have more endurance. They have more stamina. They need to eat less. They need to drink less. They heal faster. They basically become a more deadly version of themselves and a better warrior. They also pick up the ability that their channelers have to sense shadow spawn, so they can feel shadow spawn or the wrongness of shadow spawn in a very limited area around them. Aes Sedai can also do this. Most channelers can. And it's just one of the things that bleeds through the bond to the warder. So right now, that sounds like a really good deal. Warders get all these benefits. But there is a drawback, and the drawback is the benefit to the Aes Sedai. So this drawback is the Aes Sedai has complete and absolute control over their warder. They can compel them using the one power to do anything they want for any reason at all. Now, it's something that's not talked about widely in the book series, and Aes Sedai kind of shy away from it. However, it is a fact of the matter. That's what the Aes Sedai gets out of it. They get, in some cases, an unwilling servant to do their bidding. So if it's dangerous, the warder doesn't want to do it, or if it's against their code of ethics, the Aes Sedai can use one power to compel them to do these things. So that's what they get. Now, there are other drawbacks. If an Aes Sedai loses a warder, so a warder dies, which has happened in the show, we've seen that, the Aes Sedai becomes incredibly distraught. So think of the grief of losing a loved one times a lot. It really, really messes them up. In some cases, it messes them up so bad that they never bond a warder again, although a lot of members of the Green Aja immediately bond a warder right after losing a warder because it helps to lessen the loss of that warder. But it really messes them up. They're able to function, but it's just soul-crushing to them. If a warder loses an Aes Sedai, however, it's completely different. They basically go into a rage. They lose the will to live, and in most cases die trying to avenge their Aes Sedai. And if they don't, if there's nothing to avenge, or if they can't avenge, they find some other way to die, whether it be suicide, traveling to the Blight to fight Shadowspawn, fighting in nameless, pointless wars, fighting against all odds. They don't want to live anymore. They lose the will to live. Now, there are some cases in the book series where warders lose an Aes Sedai, and there are some Aes Sedai that are specialized in bringing those warders back from the brink and letting them live and enjoy life again, and they bond them, and they work with them and train them, and try to bring them back. It happens in the book series. It's not necessarily a death sentence to a warder to lose an Aes Sedai, but it's pretty close. It is, and we've seen that in season 1. We've seen it a bit more in the promotional material of season 3, where you had a member of the Black Aja lose 2 warders, and she just seemed pumped about it. Like she enjoyed the pain, and you've seen a warder lose an Aes Sedai in season 1, and he was not so pumped about it. If that makes any sense, he ended up losing the battle with his own internal struggles during that. So, kind of a horrible thing to lose either an Aes Sedai or warder. There are big consequences to that. So, we've talked about the who's and the what's. Let's talk a little bit about who bonds warders. All right, so every Aja, save one, bonds warders, and most Ajas only bond one warder at a time. Now, there are exceptions, of course, to this, but by and large, for the most part, every Aja, by tradition, only bonds one warder. Reds don't bond any at all, which is kind of weird to me because they go out in the world and they do the very dangerous job of hunting down men who can channel. Warders would be useful, and that is an argument made by some Red Sisters in the books, but they're always shot down. It's forbidden by their Aja. Green Aja, however, bond multiple warders. They can. I mean, sometimes they bond one. In very rare cases, they don't bond any, but usually they bond 2 or more. And they're the only Aja that can bond more than one warder. Everyone else, by tradition, only bonds 1. Now, the brown Aja, which deals in history and knowledge and research, and the white Aja, which deals in cold logic, they tend to bond less warders than the other Ajas. I don't think there's any statistics out there in the book series that says exactly how many less they bond or how often it does, but it's mentioned a number of different times in the book series that they tend not to if they're staying in the tower and doing research, because what's the point? If they're going out and doing field work or going into the world, then yes, they tend to bond a warder, but usually warders carry books for them and do research, and it's not super happy agreement for either one of them. So in some cases, browns and whites do not bond warders at all. Now, I've been saying throughout this entire video that warders are mostly men, and by and large they are. 99% of warders are men, like I said, and there's only 3 instances of women warders in the books. And there's slight differences between bonding a man and a woman. So a woman warder, so if an Aes Sedai bonds a woman, everything is exactly the same as we've already stated for a warder. All the drawbacks, all the benefits, the psychic link between the Aes Sedai and the warder, it's all there, with the exception of the fact that their psychic link becomes incredibly strong. So they can feed off each other's emotions and create sort of a feedback loop. So if the Aes Sedai becomes angry, the warder should become angry. And when the warder becomes angry, it makes the Aes Sedai more angry and just in a loop. Same with joy, any strong emotion. any strong emotion at all, they run the risk of kind of putting themselves in some sort of loop where it makes things worse for them. It makes them, their emotions run away with each other. It's talked about a couple of different times, and they have to be very careful about that, but that's really the only major difference between bonding a man and bonding a woman. Again, men are mostly bonded due to tradition, and then for any other reason. There's no other real drawbacks that is mentioned in the book series. Now, there are many different types of bonds. The one we've talked about is the traditional warder bond. So an Aes Sedai bonding someone to be their warder, to be their protector, and give them these benefits. Now, later on in the book series, and this is where we're getting into spoiler territory, which is not going to ruin plot points or character arcs, but will ruin things that happen in the book, things that are. There is a group of men channelers, and these men channelers are called Ashaman. These Ashaman figured out a couple of different types of warder bonds. The first one is a bond where they bond their spouse. So these Ashaman would go out into the world and they would do whatever it is they're doing, and they would leave their spouse alone at home, and their spouse would worry about them. They would worry about their spouse. They figured out a way to create a sort of a psychic link bond between the two of them, where it doesn't talk about any other benefits except for the fact that they can feel their emotions better than the traditional warder bond. They can see where they're at or feel where they're at to much greater accuracy at a much greater distance. Essentially, it gives them both comfort in knowing that each other is okay. So that was the first type of bond the Ashaman figured out. The second type of bond the Ashaman figured out was a bond between an Ashaman and an Aes Sedai. This bond is basically much like the spouse bond, with the exception that compulsion is also used in it, and that whatever the Ashaman says, the Aes Sedai has to do. Much like the traditional warder bond, compulsion is a part of that type of bond. The next type of bond is where an Ashaman bonds an Aes Sedai, and the Aes Sedai also bonds the Ashaman. So two different channelers are bonding each other at the same time. That double bond causes such a strong psychic bond that it becomes almost telepathy. They can almost hear each other's thoughts, their intentions, their emotions, what they want, all becomes almost imperceivable from their own. So it becomes sort of like, I don't want to say that they're sharing one mind, but it's pretty close to that. Now, in addition to that, it also kind of messes with the way they use the one power. So in the world of the Wheel of Time, circles are groups of people that use one power together. And the only thing we've seen so far in the show is circles of women channeling. And women can link together voluntarily and use the one power. Men can also be part of these circles. However, a woman has to start it. So a woman has to start the circle, pull a man in, the man has to be willing, and then a woman has to control that circle if it's a man and a woman. However, if they're dual bonded, anytime the woman embraces the power or the man embraces the power, the other person also automatically embraces the power and they're linked. So that link happens right away. And a man can control that circle of two, which he can't normally in a traditional circle. And in a normal traditional circle, if you want to pass control to somebody, you have to be willing to pass it to them and they have to be willing to accept it. In this double bond scenario, it's whoever has the best willpower. You can wrench that control from the other party if you're stubborn enough. So all of those things happen differently to men and women who can channel that bond each other in a double bond. And it's explored a little bit in the books, but not a ton. And it's one of those things that I imagine after the end of the book series would become more of a point where you can figure out what other objects or what other things they can do with a double bond. Now, the final type of bond that's described in the book series is a third-party bond. Third-party bond is used by the Aiel. So you have a wise one who can channel, and they bond two people together who want to become first sisters or first brothers. So these people are very close to one another. They want to become family. This bond essentially simulates them being in the womb together, simulates a rebirth, and it is a very, very weak form of the spouse bond that the Ashaman use. So in other words, they can sort of kind of feel each other's thoughts a little bit, see each other where they are, feel their emotions a bit, not to a great extent, but just a little bit. So there are a ton of different bonds, and again, like I said, no plot points and character arcs in that, but that is some spoilery territory for the book series because these are things that happen much later on in the books. I don't know if we're going to see them in the show anytime soon, but it is something that I hope to see on screen, and I hope to see that in the X-ray bits where they talk about the bonds a bit more. So there's that. Now, let me know in the comments down below what you folks want to hear next. I'm going to be doing news videos. I'll be doing video tomorrow about the drop. A lot of you commented on the last video and said I got my time zones wrong. I totally did. I wasn't thinking. I got mixed up backwards. I went back instead of forward for time zones. So it's at it's going to happen at 10 a.m. Pacific time tomorrow. The fan event that's happening that you can sign up on. Watch my last video for more information on that, and that'll be around 2 p.m. my time, not 6 a.m. like I stated in that video. So I'll put the correction here rather than apologizing 1,000 times in the comments in the last video. So let me know what you folks want to know next. Any other explain videos you want prior to Season 3 dropping? So far we've done the Black Aja. Today we've done Warders and Warder Bonds. Is there anything else you want to know before the season drops? Thank you so very much for sticking with us here to the very end. Here's to many more.